Casting from the basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
2 weeks into the NFL season, and there is a lot of doom and gloom in Indianapolis. Welcome back to the Sports Vault, everyone. Jersey Joe Archino back here. And obviously, coming into the season for the Indianapolis Colts, a lot of people, rightfully so, had the Colts in a very high situation. Andrew Luck getting the incredible contract that he did, having a quarterback like that. People expect them, and the expectations are going to be very high. But so far to start the season for them, I think we see the continued story of what the Colts have been, and that is just such a high degree of uncertainty. And if I had to pick a word to define the state of the Indianapolis Colts, I think it would have to be uncertain. And it's hard to say that because in the NFL it's so hard to win games, but it's so easy to see what wins games, and the quarterback is really the driving force that motivates that. And Andrew Luck, I think a lot of us have felt to this point, is as good as it gets, one of the brightest futures, as everything as good as it can come. But now when we look at the situation, I thought coming into the season, right off the bat, it was a bad situation because Chuck Pagano is back, and then, of course, Ryan Grigson, the GM, is back. And, I mean, look, the Colts roster, you stack the Colts roster up with the other teams in the AFC South, it's the worst roster, hands down. The Titans have a better roster. The Texans have a better roster. The Jaguars have a better roster. The Colts, even from a GM and a coaching standpoint, are very much near the bottom of that division. And the one thing that they have, and even now I think people are starting to have a little bit more doubt, is the quarterback position. But you look around that division now, Blake Bortles looks like he's continuing to get better. Marcus Mariota, I think, is still so young that we can't really make a claim on him yet, but he has shown a lot of growth. And then Brock Osweiler has won his first 2 games as a starter for the Texans. So when you look around that division, everyone else is getting better. And the Colts are just continuing to stay where they are. And again, it brings back that word, uncertain. And it shouldn't be like that. They should have turned the page. And I think really, once Bruce Arians was there, and I mean, look, Chuck Pagano, you have to give him so much respect and so much credit for fighting the battle that he did, overcoming the disease that he did. But even with that said, I mean, you just have to be honest. The guy's just not a good NFL head coach. I mean, I think he did some great things when he was a coordinator, but what's he done as the head coach of the Colts? I mean, in the biggest games that have mattered the most, he just has not gotten the job done. And from the roster construction standpoint, Grigson, I mean, you look at this roster, there's no running game. The weapons that Andrew Luck has around him, guys like T.Y. Hilton, guys like Dantes Moncrief, I mean, these are guys which have been elevated because of the quarterback, but that's it, and that's the only reason because of it. There's no Antonio Browns on this offense to help Andrew Luck. He doesn't have a running game behind him. The offensive line, they tried to address that in the draft, but even their offensive line isn't great. Defensively, I don't see many playmakers, and it goes back to the point, and I always kind of use the comparison of LeBron James's first go-around with the Cavaliers, where he was so good that he made the ownership and everyone believe how good that Cavs team was, but they really weren't. It was just him carrying that team on his shoulders, and this is a very similar situation. LeBron was a little different, though, because he could escape that situation when he eventually reached free agency, and Andrew Luck, obviously, he's kind of signed his life to that team with his contract, but football is much different from basketball, and that's where it's hard. But Luck himself hasn't been great in these first 2 games of the season, losing his opener 39-35 against the Lions, and then just losing this past weekend 34-20 against the Broncos on the road. But I mean, you look at his stats against Denver: 21 of 40, 197, 1 touchdown, and a pick. The Colts just don't put themselves in good situations early. I mean, you watch all their games early, and it just seems like they put themselves in a hole. Against the Lions, they almost come back, but Matt Stafford's able to pull out the win for the Lions. And again in this game against Denver, it's close late. Denver pulls out to the early lead, and then Andrew Luck turns the ball over at the end, and Denver is able to secure the victory. But I think that the mere fact that they struggle so heavily to start these games is really an indictment on the coaching staff. And just in all phases. I mean, you have a once in a generation type of talent at the quarterback position, but he's just not being coached properly, and he's not being surrounded with the talent he needs properly. Now, I want to address the Andrew Luck thing for a minute because I have been one of his biggest supporters, one of his staunchest supporters over the seasons, but I think now it's kind of the question could be raised. Is Andrew Luck really as good as we all think he is? And if you had asked me that question before the season started, I wouldn't have even given it any thought or consideration. But I think now when we look at it, and last season he kind of got a pass because the start to his season was not good by any means, but he was dealing with nagging injuries. He was hurt. He wasn't himself. So he kind of got a pass there. But now we're kind of seeing it, the looming kind of effect carrying over. And to me now, I mean, I'm waiting for the wake-up call. I'm waiting for that Andrew Luck. Now, I think at the same time, it's very hard to still have that conversation because what Luck has done with that roster, being able to improve season after season and get the Colts further and further, I think that does show you how good he is. But again, now the conversation is becoming a little bit more viable. Is Luck this revolutionary guy? Is he as good as we put him on that pedestal to be? I think that conversation now has a little bit more weight than it did seasons ago, but it's still one of those situations where the problems for the Colts are identifiable, and sometimes it's hard to get to the root of what the problem really is, but it really is an organizational thing. And I think obviously when you look at them top to bottom, the GM position and the head coach position is the biggest problem of all. And when you carry that over and you let those guys stay on, I mean, I think that was the biggest mistake the Colts could have done. And I did a segment about this earlier where I really said, I mean, you're really signing up for the same thing. There's not going to be progression. There's probably going to be a little bit more regression just because you can't continue to put out that same product with that same results. You need a new face. You need somebody new to change things up. And obviously, Bruce Arians, what he was able to do with Andrew Luck, I think that's when you looked at the Colts and you thought, this is really going to be the team that's on the rise. But once he took the job in Arizona, which for every reason he should have, he's as good as it gets, I think you kind of started to look at the Colts for what they are now. And over time, although they were winning, I still don't think we had that supreme degree of being convinced. And I think now it's reaching that highest point that it's ever been. But obviously it's there. The Colts have a big game coming up this Sunday. They need their first win of the season badly. But I don't think things really will dramatically change for the Colts until they get a change at head coach and until they get a change at general manager. It's been enough time. Both guys have had enough time, but they need a new face. They need some new leadership and some new blood in the room. But until the next time, Jersey Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino. And I'll catch everybody in the next segment.